Underground. 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 Underground.
Greetings, surface dwellers. My name is Michael, and these are my chthonic musings. Today we're going to take a look at random tables. First, in role-playing games, of course. First, I'll do a little bit of a celebration of the magic and majesty of random tables. And then follow it up with a discussion about some of the limitations and drawbacks of using random tables, particularly during play. And then we'll talk about some techniques and solutions, including curation of smaller tables for use during play, a little discussion of the use of cards as both manipulatives and randomizers, and also a little discussion of Goblin's Henchman's Hexflower game engine and how we can use that tool in our games. So first of all, after I came up with the idea of doing this video based on some prep work that I had done for a recent game, I decided to go through a couple of games and just flip through, see if I could find some tables, hopefully of different types, and then just made a roll on the table, noted it down, and didn't have to do a re-roll or anything like that. So we're just taking the first entry that came up. And I thought it would be a little bit of fun. So we'll start with Shadowdark. And I rolled on Shadowdark on the Castle District table. So we've got our players moving through the Castle District and going through the encounters. And I rolled a percentile, a 71, and came up with the following entry. The lead actor on an open street stage falls dead mid-word. That's pretty exciting, pretty evocative, and interesting. Dragonbane. So we're moving through travel, and ask our Pathfinder, the person leading the travel, to make a bushcraft roll, and they failed it. So we roll on the mishaps table. D12, rolling a 10, and it comes up landslide. The player characters are walking in rough terrain when the ground suddenly gives way under their feet. Everyone must make an evade roll. Anyone who fails suffers D10 damage. Tales of Argosa. Now what did I come up with? Oh, chase events. So our players are in the midst of a chase. They are either the chasers or the quarry. And I rolled a d12 on this table. 5. Random setback. Roll a 1d6. So I got a table inside of a table. On the d6, I also rolled a 5. And that came up hostile third party. A random PC is beset by a hostile random encounter. The character must make a luck dex save or drop out of the chase and deal with the random encounter. That's pretty interesting. Daggerheart. Went through consumables. All right, so, you know, our party is going to, you know, a potion shop or something and seeing what's available. So we roll on the table. I'm rolling 3d12, came up with a 26, and got a Major Bolster Potion. You gain a +1 bonus to your strength until your next rest. And to be honest, I was a little less enthused with the, not quite as evocative, I thought, from a narrative first game. So I thought like, oh, maybe I just got a bum entry and look down. So, well, some of these are not just like, you know, major something potion. This one has a name, Red Thorn Saliva, entry 33. You can apply this saliva to a weapon that deals physical damage to add a d12 to your next damage roll with that weapon. Well, at least the name was evocative. Moving on. Our party is traveling through the fabled city of Greyhawk, through one of the seedier districts, and we encounter a harlot. But what kind of a harlot? We roll a percentile, 15, and we find out it's a brazen strumpet. So, yeah, let's move on with the further discussion. Okay, so having established that random tables can be awesome, and we love a good random table, we're going to take a look at some of the potential challenges. And going through this methodically, we're going to avoid raising objections right away and say, well, that's easy to fix. You could just do this, that, or the other thing. And just focus just on the potential challenges. And we'll follow up afterwards with solutions based on, the abilities of, various game masters. All right, first item. Stalling gameplay while looking up and rolling on the random table. This is obviously not an ideal. If the gameplay is being stalled and you're picking up the book and trying to find where's that table and then finding the right dice and rolling the dice and get the entry, all of that is suboptimal. Even if the resulting entry and the gameplay from that point is fantastic, it's still that part of it prior to that is a bit of a problem. Or can be. Again, these are all potential challenges. Second item. Resulting entry is a challenge to integrate improv in current play. This is kind of, depending on the type of table, the more detailed and evocative and thought-provoking it is, the bigger this challenge can be. Because you might have a fantastic entry, but then end up giving it short shrift because it's just you're not able to pull that all together in your mind and work with every element of this table entry right then and there, or you might create inconsistencies or affect your pacing of your game and have it veer off in a direction that might be exciting in the short term, but make the entire session or your entire campaign be disjointed in the long term. Resulting entry is a duplicate of a prior event. I call this glitch in the matrix. You might have an entry that comes and it's fantastic, but if you're like me, you might be rolling on a percentile table that has lots and lots, up to 100 different fantastic entries. But invariably, you get the same result that you rolled the last time. It's only 1% chance, but like I said, if you're like me, it happens more than it should. And then, and again, we'll get to, you could say that, well, that's easy to fix. You could just re-roll it or whatever. But I want to lay it out there, because if you just went with it and didn't do something, you'd get, okay, the same very unique thing that happened just yesterday is happening again, and that doesn't make sense, and so then you've created a problem in your game. The resulting entry is not right for current session of gameplay. You might come up with a fantastic entry, but it just doesn't fit what's happening in your game, either period. It's just not the type of game you're running right now, or it may not be right for this time, for what's happening in this current session. And finally, the standard random table has no awareness of anything outside of the table, such as the status of the environment or characters or prior rolls on this table. So you might have, a table that's pretty good, but you're in a certain situation, let's say weather, for example, because, that'll be something that we talk about, that isn't really random, entirely random. Because if you took the weather of every day of a year and had 365 entries, obviously they're real, so it's all nothing fantastic. But if you were to roll it randomly day by day, it would be bizarre. It's snowing one day, it's 90 degrees the next day, and so forth, because weather doesn't work randomly like that. So that's something we'll talk about. So does anyone remember the old Henny Youngman joke? Patient goes to his doctor and says, "Doctor, it hurts when I do this." And of course the doctor says, "Then don't do that." Or alternately, there's one where the patient says, "Doctor, I broke my leg in 2 places." And so the doctor says, "Then don't go to those places." So similarly to that, our first possible solution is if we're having some challenges in using random tables during gameplay, that we move some random table use out of game time use and into game preparation. So we can still have our cake and eat it too. Instead of spending time at the table, we spend a little time during preparation, go through the random tables, we get these ideas, and then we decide in a place where we have a little bit more time how we're going to integrate it. So we don't have the stalling gameplay. We can decide how to integrate into our game, or if we want to integrate it. Right? So if something is just not right, or it's a duplicate event, it's already happened before, we reject it and don't include it. We can also use the random tables and just kind of not roll on them, just peer down through the table entries and say, "Oh, that's interesting. I think that's an idea that I might steal and put into a game." And where you put it, you can either put it into tie it to a certain location and say, okay, this event, this atmosphere, this description, I'm going to put it into this one particular place, so when the players go to that location, this might happen, or they might see this, or experience this. You could also have it just as a, let's say like a free-floating idea. You've got it there, but it's not latched to any particular place, but you've got that idea that you can just move in kind of on demand, whenever you feel like it's appropriate. Somebody's traveling somewhere, things are a little slow, you pull that in. There are advantages, disadvantages to doing that, and not leaving it to the dice. But, it is a possibility. And lastly, I would say you can move it into another curated table. So this is, not just a table of, all the encounters that somebody might have traveling through a forest, but this is a much more compact table with much fewer entries, a handful of entries, for what encounters you're going to use for this particular forest that your players happen to be in. If you do this, you might decide to use something that I call a multi-column table. So it's much more compact, which increases the possibility of rolling a duplicate if you're rolling randomly on this table to some degree. And I'll show in just a little bit, the multi-column tables can accommodate duplicates, because if you roll on a table, you get an entry, you mark that you've used that entry, and then the second time, if you roll the duplicate, you can just move over to the next. You see that you've used that entry, you can just move over to the next column. And by doing this, you can, one, have a variety of possibilities for that one random row that on that table. But also you can also use it to create like a progression where if you're aware, okay, the first time I roll on this table, this happens, then you move to the next thing. So you can do things like if there's a possibility that you're going to have like a really dangerous creature on your table of a possible wandering encounter, you could have the first column simply be evidence that this creature is in the area. You just see, if it's a flying creature, you see the creature overhead or the shadow of that creature passing over your party. And then without actually physically encountering the creature, your party becomes aware of that creature. And so the next time, it shouldn't be a surprise if they continue to linger in this area. It shouldn't be a surprise that things might ratchet up a little bit on the next few entries. And conversely, you can have subsequent entries where things are winding down and being depleted. So your party is clearing out a particular dungeon, and the wandering monsters are getting more sparse as time goes by. So let's take a look at sample multi-column table. Here we have a sample that has 5 rows and 3 columns for each row. We can see that we determine which entry we're going to use by rolling 2d6, and therefore get a number on a bell curve from 2 to 12. I've written off to the left-hand side also the percentage values of how likely it is to get in that range of numbers. Just for our purposes. It wouldn't actually be a part of the table itself. So we have a total of 15 entries. Now I didn't expand on what is in these entries. This is just a sample. And I don't want to take up too much time here because we've got a lot of things to cover. But I will say that I plan on participating in RPG A Day 2025 during the month of August with a daily series of very short videos. And so what I will do is for August 2nd, the prompt is prompt. The word of the video is prompt. And I'll use that to revisit this multi-column table and put together one that actually has details in it. And that'll be kind of fun. So look forward to that. So we have 15 different entries in this table, and each entry has a checkbox in the corner. I've got some of them checked here, but that's we'll do a little bit of theater to the mind, and I'll go through exactly how those checks came about. So let's say we've got this table of all these different entries, and we're rolling on a dungeon events table. So periodically we've got some sort of methodology for, every other turn we're rolling a d6, and on a 1 we get a dungeon event or something like that. And the first time that happens, we get an event. Let's say we rolled a 7. So we're on the third row there, entry number 3. And whatever that happens to be, it may be, orc guards are patrolling. It may be, a cold breeze comes through the area that you're in and perhaps extinguishing open flames in that area. Whatever event it is, whether it's a monster encounter or some other event. But once we're done with that, we check that box. And then the next time we have a dungeon event, we roll again. Let's say we get a 3. And so entry 1. And we resolve whatever entry that is and proceed on. The next time it's a 4. So we get entry number 2. So far we've gotten 3 out of the 5 entries in column 1. But the next time we roll a 5, and it's also the second row. So this time, since entry 2 is already checked off, we move over to the right to the second column and do entry whatever is in entry 7, and we resolve that. And once that's done, we put a check marks, and so forth. So we are not using duplicate entries. We're moving forward pretty cleanly. When you get to the end and you've used all 3 columns, there's a number of different techniques. One, you could have a column at the end that doesn't have a checkbox, and it's something that duplicates are not really a problem. You could have, an encounter that's a certain random number of sturges or stingbats or something, and decide that essentially there's an endless supply somewhere. There's a humongous cavern filled with these creatures, and you just don't have to worry about them being depleted. So it's an event that can occur over and over and over again. Alternately, what you could do is you could say if everything's depleted, just as a rule, you go down to the next row. And perhaps the row that's on the very bottom is, even acts like a clock or something. I'll just give like an example where you could have, let's say you're in your party's exploring a wizard tower. and it's somewhat unstable. So the entry 5 on the last row could be tremors and an earthquake, but just enough to foreshadow. You describe it, and the shaking, and things are clanking around a little bit maybe, but there's no damage, and nobody's getting hit on the head or anything like that. But the second time through on that row, entry 10, yeah, maybe this time, it's a little bit more severe, and some of the ceiling stones are coming loose, and now you got to be, dodging a little bit or get clonked on the head with a stone. And then entry 15, if you get that far, well, this could be, okay, now we have triggered the final collapse of the tower, and that could be, well, it could be immediately, in which case it's pretty severe. That's like the end of things. But you probably want to foreshadow that to the party. You don't want to be in the tower or get that far. Or you could just use it as, well, that's the beginning of things getting super severe. And that's where your characters should be asking questions like, okay, if I jump out of this window in the 3rd story, how much damage am I going to take hitting the ground? Because I do not want to be in this tower when it finally comes down. So that's just, as an example. And another solution that I'll throw out there is, instead of the multi-column tables, is to use cards for your curated selection of table entries. And we can use these cards in lieu of dice as our randomizers. So right from the get-go, I will say I enjoy using cards in my games. The tactile nature, the art, and it's a personal preference. Not everybody, will enjoy integrating, cards into their RPG system, and their RPG games, I should say. But I do. So, and it's an option. So we'll discuss that option. I basically divide the use of cards into like 2 different types. Manipulatives and randomizers, and the cards can be both, but those are the 2 basic functions that I see. And basically we'll start with the randomizers because that's the easiest thing, and these are cards that you will use to put into like kind of a deck, shuffle them up and draw on the cards to get a random result that you don't know what you're going to get, and you use that typically in lieu of dice in your game, and in some ways it can be function equivalent to dice, but the major difference with the cards being that usually when you draw a card, you can take that card, once you've resolved what drawing that card means, you can put that card into what's typically called, a discard pile. And it is now out of the picture, out of the deck. And so we have solved the duplicate problem, for the time being. It's not necessarily the case. You can take that card, put it back in, or at some point, take all your discards and put, shuffle them back into the deck. But it is something that, is built into the nature of cards as randomizers. Now, cards as manipulatives, basically is, you take the randomization part out of it, and the card just simply functions as one of a number of things. Like I talked about in an earlier video, the condition cards for Dragonbane. So it can just be like a visual reminder, and also a little bit of a, what do you call it, like cheat sheet or something like that, with some information on it that you can reference. Similarly, a while back, there was a third party that teamed up with Wizards of the Coast to do spell cards for 5th edition D&D. And so those are like little, mostly cheat sheets. So you don't, you've got your spell card with your information on it, and you don't have to go back to the book. You can just reference your card and see all the information that for that spell. And I used it for like one of the first character that I had for 5th edition. Also used it because it was a cleric, so you could like kind of curate. You had a certain number of spells that you could have available to you, but from the entire list of whatever level, first level, second level spells that were in the books. So I also used it for that purpose, so that I could, set up the list of spells that I had available to me, and then with the different, backing sleeve, I would do the cantrips, because those were fixed. Whatever you had, so they didn't get swapped out, and it worked pretty well. So I'll also say about the sleeves. Everybody probably knows this, but with the introduction of trading card games, there grew up an industry about protecting these cards from damage, and so just about anywhere, any game store, you can get plastic sleeves to put your cards into. And I'm talking about these, there are different size cards, but I'm talking about primarily standard poker size, cards, and the same as just about, I'm sure, most trading games, I should say, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. Not sure about some of the new ones like Lorcana, but I'm almost positive that, it's the standard size. As well as the new, Daggerheart game, they also use cards in that game. Not just for spells and abilities, but also for like your, what do they call it, ancestry, and your background, and a few other things as well. So yeah, and you can also, I'll mention, you can also get just blank cards. I get them from Amazon, and so you can just write on those cards. You can also get labels or stickers. I don't know what you want to call them, but peel off pressure sensitive labels that are card size or just slightly smaller than card size, so that they'll fit easily onto a card. So you can print whatever you want, and then apply the sticker. Or the other thing is, you can really just print out on a piece of paper and cut it and put it into the sleeve. And I like to have a little bit of a heft to the card, so as well as the piece of paper, I will put in another card, either the blank cards, or you can just raid some of your other cards. If you're into trading card games, I'm sure you have like boxes of common cards that have zero worth, and you can just throw those in to just give it a little bit of weight. If you're using the card as a randomizer, you kind of want to make sure that when it's turned over, that they're all of a similar weight. So whatever you do to one, you do to them all, so that you can't easily tell the difference. You don't have one card that's 3 times as thick as the other ones, and so you obviously know what it is. What else? Also, there are some dry erase cards also, as well, and there is a gamer who has a YouTube channel, Flint Fireforge, who introduced these particular cards to me, and I'll in the description give some information so that you can look up that video. He also has like an Amazon affiliate link. If you look at the video and decide, yeah, I'd like to pick up a copy, it'll be nice and easy. And what else? With the one thing I wanted to put a picture of all different kind of cards and uses of cards, and I was going to just also put like a standard poker deck kind of, but for some reason of all the cards that I have, I could not find my standard regular cards, so I substituted in for regular poker deck, substituted in a WitchPig deck, which I got from through Drivethrurpg. I think it's Blood Monkey Design is the publisher, and it ties into their the Midderlands campaign setting, I believe. And although it's not a standard poker deck, the selection of cards that I pulled in, have different suits. So I picked 4 of the different suits, and 2 of them are red cards, and two of the suits are black cards. So you can do the same thing with a set of poker cards. And because of these different qualities, different suits, different colors, different numbers, you can simultaneously, with using it as like one whole set, like one table of 12 entries, let's say, you can also simulate something similar to like clocks, where you can keep track of the various numbers or suits or colors. So let's say I've got an entry where I keep track of like numbers, so like all the number ones. So as you're going through pulling from like your different dungeon events, you pull like the one of comets or something like that, and so you also mark on the you do the entry as normal, resolve it, whatever one of comets happens to be in your table of 12 events. But then you could also have like a little clock for the number 1 with the 4 boxes, and just check off, okay, we hit one of the ones. And then if you keep doing that and going through different cards, if you happen to get the 4th one, then you might have an additional event, or that occurs concurrently with the 4th card, or separately, at some other part of your dungeon or wherever you happen to be. Something happens at that time. So it's kind of an interesting that you can do. And of course, you can do it also with, and not just with the numbers, but with the suits. And in that case, since the way I have it shown here with 12 different cards, you'd have 3 cards in a suit. So that would be a 3 event clock. And if you did a number, it would be there's 4 different suits with that number, so there'd be a 4 check mark clock. And with colors, you could either do all 6, or just and any of them you can reduce it down. It doesn't have to be the full number, but it's just another interesting thing that you can do when you're using cards as your with that type of card. Simulated either a poker deck or something similar to a poker deck. You can integrate that into your system. And now to address our final potential challenge, where a standard random table doesn't have any awareness of anything outside of itself. We'll move on to what was, part of the initial driving point of me making this video, the Hexflower game engine. But before I do that, I do want to give a mention to Shadow Dark and a technique that they had in there for random terrain generation for hex crawl that also somewhat addresses the same kind of situation. And that is, they have a technique which has a separate table, what's called like new hex here, which references the random hex terrain table, but by a relative position. And by that I mean this table has 4 entries. One of them, the least likely, if you roll a 12 on 2d6, is that you generate a new hex terrain. So that one is like kind of a reset, and you go and start that over. But like I said, that's the least likely. The other 3 entries in this table are that your new terrain for the next hex is the same as the current terrain that you're coming from, or there's another entry that it's 1 step away, referencing the original table, but relatively from where you were. So you've got kind of that memory of where you're starting from. Or and the final entry is you move 2 steps away in that initial table. So I did want to mention that because that does address that potential challenge. All right, the Hexflower game engine. If you search Goblin's Henchman Hexflower, you should be easily be able to find his or her, I don't really know, blog on the internet, and from there you can read more about it. You can also, there's a direct hyperlink in there to the PDF of the Hexflower Cookbook on Drivethrurpg. I'm going to just go over briefly here. This is from the cookbook. What is a Hexflower game engine? A Hexflower game engine is like a random table, but with a memory. That is, the last outcome has an effect on the next outcome. And that's what we're looking for. There are a couple of different components to the Hexflower game engine, and I appreciate that the very first top icon here is gears inside somebody's head, because yes, your brain is an important component of any role-playing game engine or system. You have to understand what you're doing, think it through. Also, the Hexflower. All right, so this is kind of should look familiar. It's hexes in a pattern with a center hex, and then a ring around that of hexes, 6 hexes, and then another ring around that for a total of 19 hexes. And basically these are like 19 table entries in our table. And then there's a separate hex off to the side there. You can see labeled the navigation hex. And this is going to be very similar to that Shadow Dark table that directed your movement in the other table. This navigation hex is what we're going to roll on to move through the Hexflower and get our entries. And the Hexflower is going to be designed in such a way that each of these entries has some relationship to the ones next to it. And you can move in any of the 6 directions provisionally. We'll get to that. A few other things to note is that in the standard Hexflower game engine, you can, if you move out of it, let's say you were in number 14 here, and then you move to, what I'll call like northwest. You moved that way off of the Hexflower. You would kind of what I call, asteroid physics from the, the arcade game. You would come in the other side into hex number 6. Similarly, if you were in number 17 and you went north, you would wrap around and come into number 2. And then, I'd say provisionally, because there are some techniques where you can do things like prevent that. You can say, no, you can't wrap around, you can't wrap around that way, and you put a little hex and says, so, if that happens, you just stay where you are. The next entry is the same as the current entry. Or if, with little arrows, you can say, well, if you're going off the hex flower, you would normally wrap around, but instead, we're going to redirect you to this other hex. And I've done a little bit of that in my sample. And so let's get to that. All right, so my sample here is a weather engine. So I'm using the Hexflower game engine to create a weather engine. And this is for a game, the Horse Lord of Tanishorn, from the Erudite DM's first zine, Warhorse. And so I'm doing prep for this game. And I should just step back a little bit wider and tell you a little bit more about the prep that I'm doing for this game. And I'm going to try to do it with minimal to no spoilers for the adventure. But essentially, the adventure could be divided up into 3 sections, and the first section is a travel section. Now, it's not very far. It's either a 2 or 3 day journey, depending on whether you're mounted and can do it in 2 days, or you're going to take it on foot. And really, coming from this zine, which is all about horses and mounted travel and war horses, and knights, etc. We're going to try to, push the, the mounted and wagons route, and make this into a 2 day event for the travel. And then the second part will be, you get to your destination and, a little bit of role-playing and intrigue, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And then, the final part is, the actual retrieval of the MacGuffin and depending on what you find out about what's going on, maybe some other events. But, without spoiling anything, that's pretty much it. And the third section is like a dungeon crawl. So this prep is for the first part of it, the travel. And like I said, so part of it is, we're trying to, encourage mounted travel. And there's a guide that goes with you on this. The other thing is that you're not like trekking through the jungle of, the Isle of Dread. There's a road. There's a road that goes from where you start out to your destination. So it's very linear. Not to say that, I wouldn't let the player characters, veer off, but we're not really asking them to do any kind of real trailblazing here. So a couple of things come together in this prep. One, I've been wanting to do a Hexflower for a while, so, there's a little bit of that. I was just like, kind of forces its way in. 2, I had also just gotten some, kind of an impulse purchase, some wooden hex tiles from Amazon. And so I was like, what am I going to do with this? Oh, I know. I'm going to, make this part of my prep work for this adventure. And 3, I was also mulling over a little bit of from a blog called Necropraxis. This idea of the hazard die, rolling of a d6, and having different types of events, including what they list here is like setbacks for one, and fatigue for number 2, and expiration is number 3, locality number 4, percept is 5, and advantage 6. So I kind of had this mulling around in my head, and so I said, okay, I'm going to kind of use this, and I'm going to introduce cards as well. So I'm going to have this Hexflower weather engine, and potentially randomly interacted with by cards that are drawn, and do it on a hex by hex basis all along the journey to this to the destination place of adventure. And in addition to what kind of tools I'm going to use, I also have a couple of objectives in mind. The first of which is I'm trying to see if I can get run through this adventure and get it to fit into maybe a 4-hour convention slot. So I'm just testing that out, and in doing so, of those different parts, I figured it would be reasonable if maybe this first travel section could be like no more than 90 minutes, an hour and a half. And then the kind of role-playing investigation part, maybe half an hour or so. And then the final up to 2 hours for the dungeon crawl. I figure that might kind of reasonable. So I'm designing with that kind of in mind, time constraints kind of in mind, as well as the purposes of this travel, because it seems like it's very simple. Like how can you make it interesting for like 2 days of travel? It's just on a road, but the changes that occur as you're traveling from this beginning destination, and then you can see from the adventure, like there's a lot of places along the way that are vacated, so I'm kind of keeping this in mind. Okay, so these people were left their homes, and so there must be like refugees of a sort, and there's also some other people from this kingdom, some other knights, let's say, and so I'm in my mind, I'm putting in a question of, okay, the perennial question of like, why is our party doing this? Why are the PCs doing this? And why don't they get someone more capable? So putting together like, okay, so what's happening in the rest of this kingdom, and how are things like kind of falling apart, and so maybe these knights are desperately needed elsewhere, and also the PCs might be a little bit under the radar, so to speak. If the king were to move his big guns in, he might tip off, that he's really concerned, and doesn't want that. So he wants somebody a little bit more low key and under the radar, like I said. So things like this are going through my mind, and so what I want to do in the travel is like continue along with. There's a rumor table, a good rumor table in this adventure. So we're going to lean into that more and start either reinforcing some of the rumors, or adding to some of the rumors. And so we're building knowledge along the way, and we're also building a feel of like things are going really wrong for the people in this area. And so it's it's not just like we'll collect some coin for doing this job. It's a real like, no, this has to be solved, because people their lives are just disrupted, and terrible things are happening, and more terrible things are probably on the horizon if this doesn't get reversed. And a couple of last notes. I I don't want to give the impression that, that there's anything wrong with this adventure. Far from it. The tables in there for encounters along this travel section and for the weather are good. They're perfectly fine, and this can be run just as is. But Mike, the erudite DM, does in his GM advice say, like, you can roll random encounters and even add your own for more flavors. So I'm taking them up on that and making some of this my own, adding a little bit of my own ideas, but really they're all his encounters that I'm just weaving in a different way. And it's also, one thing I should say, it's also a way that this kind of plays out on a very random basis. So although I have integrated into my mind all of the different pieces and the full scope of what's going on and the feeling that I want to convey, and I'm ready to role play any one of these characters along the way. The way that it's the cards and the table, the weather table, are built is that there's going to be randomness. So every time we play through this section, that randomness is going to determine. So it's not going to be the same adventure every time. It's going to be different, which will help, and certainly definitely in a convention sense as well. Although it introduces a little bit of a challenge, but it doesn't make running the same adventure over and over boring, because it's not going to be exactly the same. It's going to have the same components, but they're going to play out differently every time. So, using the template in the back of the Hexflower cookbook, I've populated the Hexflower with different weather icons, and down below, and the key listed, drew out those icons, and then put the key of like what kind of weather that represented. And I'm basing this weather from the original table in the adventure, in the zine, with a little bit expanded. I think that had 4 entries, and I've got it expanded out to 9 different entries. But realizing that, even though the Hexflower has 19 different hexes in it, you don't have to have 19 different entries. Like here, I've only got 9, so some of these weather patterns are occurring more than once. I think most of them are. Maybe the heavy rain, maybe the only one that's unique. But in any case, you can have one entry in your Hexflower or multiple ones. The other thing to note here is that in the navigation hex, it's not equal chances for the engine to move in any particular direction. So I'm not going to go through the exact, all the percentages laid out, but I will say that this particular navigation hex has a tendency to drive the counter down, mostly down, and down and to the left, and to the left in general. So I kept that in mind when designing where I'm going to put these weather patterns on this Hexflower. And the most likely situation is that it's going to be overcast and windy, maybe some rain. There is the possibility for it to be, not completely sunny, but it could be, partly sunny and windy, or clear and windy. But those entries, and I had to change this once. I did an initial layout, and it worked pretty well. But then I had to swap some things around so that I put the partly sunny and the clear weather more towards the top and right of the Hexflower. And then when I ran through a couple of iterations of that, while it's certainly possible, anything can happen. You can wind up in any particular weather pattern, but it was more likely to be that overcast, or would potentially even have thunderstorms or foggy situation. So it worked out pretty well. And I decided that after I had put together the table, the Hexflower and the navigation hex and the key, that what I was going to do is to randomize the beginning. We'll put the counter right dead center, which happens to be heavy rain, but then do 3 rolls, and after the 3rd roll, that's the starting weather. And that's where we pick up the adventure, and our player characters are out the door and into whatever weather that happens to be. And also, I could ask a player if they would like to be in charge of running this weather engine, because it's not it's whatever the weather is, what the weather is, and it's out in the open. And so it's something that somebody, I wouldn't push it on somebody, but it's something that they might enjoy. And I would enjoy it because I could say, well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. You're in heavy rain or thunderstorms. It is what it is. The first roll of the 2d6 to determine where our starting weather's going to be comes up as a 10. And checking the navigation hex, we see that both 10 and 11 go up and to the left, or you could say like northwest. So that's where we're going to move our counter into that thunderstorm icon. And remembering, we're going to do 3 rolls to determine the starting weather. This isn't this is prior to the beginning of play. The second starting weather roll is an 11, which, looking at the navigation hex, is the same direction as 10. So we're going to continue on, moving into partly sunny territory after the second starting roll. And we're moving in an unusual direction, but like I said before, it is what it is. For our third and final starting weather roll, the dice are rolled and a 7 comes up. Checking the navigation hex, this drives us down into one of the fog entries. So that is our starting weather. We're starting out on a foggy morning out of the capital of Danisheim and onto our journey. So that should give enough of an example of how the Hexflower game engine works, at least in this case. And so this video got a bit longer than I had intended. And for somebody that's notoriously quiet, I sure have been talking a lot. So what I'm going to do is I won't go through the entire test run of how this worked out for the game prep. But what I will do is for the RPG a day, day number 7 is Journey. And I think what I'll do is I will do a video on that whole test run through, and maybe there will be a little bit more spoilers than here, but I'll put it in a separate video, and so we'll wrap it up for today. So hopefully you found this video entertaining and useful. and facilitates the use of more creative and evocative random tables in your games. Because, like my t-shirt says, the horrors are never ending, yet I roll again. So until I resurface, may your successes be many and your failures be memorable.